Well, it didn't take long for Fox News to announce a new 9 p.m. show after Megyn Kelly's decision to leave for NBC. Tucker Carlson, whose program at 7 Eastern launched only a few weeks ago, moves into the coveted primetime slot tomorrow. I sat down with him here in Studio One. Tucker Carlson.
Howdy, Kurtz, ladies and gentlemen.
So now that you're officially a big primetime star, is your huge anchor ego soaring out of control?
It's out of control. Is it out of control? No. I just have a lot of email, more email than I used to have. It's a
confrontational question.
It's a little intimidating. But, you know, the beauty of working at Fox is Fox has a big audience. And one thing I'm not going to do is convince myself that it's about me. I've worked at a lot of different networks, and where you work makes all the difference, basically.
Well, you do things a little bit differently at 9 o'clock because for Fox, that's been more of as much as a news show as an opinion show because it's the only consistently live hour in prime time. So you're going to make some tweaks and adjustments here?
Of course. I mean, look, you got to have 9 o'clock is an hour for, among other things, newsmakers. And I mean, my view is that you can have a newsy interview that cuts through a lot of the cant and obfuscation and gets to the core point. Doesn't need to be confrontational or hostile or anything, but it does need to be direct, and I think viewers want that.
You're an unabashed conservative, founder of the Daily Caller. Some media critics have reacted to this by saying, well, you're sympathetic to Donald Trump, and now Fox no longer has a Trump skeptic in primetime. Fair or unfair?
Well, I'm a skeptic of everything, of everyone. And I think if there's one lesson of this election, it's that voters want deep skepticism, trained on Washington especially, but on all concentrations of power.
And you think there's not enough of that in the media?
There is not enough of that at all. At all. There's very much our team and their team. It's very partisan, but I think there's a lot of sucking up to power here, a lot of throne sniffing going on in D.C., now more than ever.
Well, you've said Trump wasn't your first choice for president, and you wrote in January you weren't even sure if he really wanted the job. I guess he's got it now. And you also said, and you repeated this the other day, that when you launched a show, you want to hold people accountable, that people in power tend to lie, that they can be pompous. So does that apply to the new president and the new administration?
Of course it does. It will always apply to anybody who's taking my money and wielding power over me, of course. What I thought about Trump from the very beginning is what I think about Trump now, which is despite his flaws as a man, he was saying things that no one else dared to say that were not only true, but resonant for a lot of people. I mean, he forced the Republican Party to rethink its economic views. I'm not even sure they've rethought them, but he has forced them to reckon with a whole different way of looking at economics. And in my view, that's why he won. And I saw that a year out, and I said, wow, people don't buy the Republican economic program, actually.
You've told the story about 15 years ago. You're on CNN. You said something nasty about Trump's hair. You got a voicemail from him. Funny, too vulgar to repeat on the air. But what did you take from that episode?
That Trump, I mean, I took a bunch of different things. That Trump is bracingly direct, that he's vulgar, and I've spent my whole life in newsrooms, so that's obviously not a departure for me, that he's hilarious, that he can be thin-skinned, and that he's interesting. And I think all of those things now.
Everybody will be asking you off the air, what do you say, what do you say? All right, now you have gotten attention with this new show as an aggressive interviewer. Some critics thought you were too aggressive. For example, with a young woman named Lauren Duca from Teen Vogue, you took her on over her criticism of Donald and Ivanka Trump, and she didn't like it, and she called you a bully, and there was a whole online debate. So is there a line between being aggressive and being too rough with a guest?
Well, it depends on who the guest is. I mean, I would never be aggressive. I mean, I'd probably be pretty timid with a lot of guests who weren't there to push their political views on other people. But the second you're out there espousing your views and demanding that other people conform to those views, I think, I have a right to press you and ask you to explain your views. And that's all I was doing with her. I was treating her like an adult. I don't think she's used to that. And she didn't care for it and started yelling at me. But I didn't treat her any differently than I'd treat anybody else who wrote what she wrote. And by the way, it's totally legitimate to dislike Trump. Of course it is. A lot of people I know dislike Trump. And it's even more legitimate to disagree with Trump, which I do myself sometimes. But I just didn't think she was explaining herself.
You paid a lot of dues. You worked for CNN. You had a show at MSNBC one time. In fact, you famously were on Crossfire when you got into it with Jon Stewart. Did you think after those two stints that maybe you were a bit snakebit when it came to being a host?
I don't know. I mean, I think maybe my one advantage is I have failed in the past, and I would recommend failure to anyone. It's painful.
Why so?
Because you learn a lot about, winning doesn't teach you anything. It ratifies all your instincts. It tells you whatever you were doing worked, keep doing it.
You feel like you're hot stuff and you do no wrong.
failure forces you to assess yourself in a way that nothing else does. And real failure, like your neighbors avert their gaze when you pull into the driveway at night. You're ashamed to be who you are. That will get you thinking about what you're doing and what you're not doing. And I learned a lot about my own shortcomings. I'm not a perfect person. I'm a much more self-aware person, though, than I was. That's for sure.
I can see that just in the exchange we're having right now. So, exit question, are you feeling the pressure?
I mean, I guess, you know, I'm a pretty small thinker, to be totally honest, and I think if I thought a lot about, wow, you know, I'm anchoring the 9 p.m. on Fox News Channel, I would be pretty nervous, but I tend to think about the show. What's the show tonight?
Yeah.
What am I going to ask? What guests do we have? As long as you keep thinking about that every single night, let's make the best show we can every day, you're fine.
I think the technical term is rock and roll. Tucker
Exactly.
Carlson, great to see you.
Thank you.